Now, heritage, as a definition, there are two words there I'm using for the whole presentation today. Heritage is a legacy of tangible physical artifacts and intangible attributes of a group or a society as inherited from our past generations. And the other word is conservation. Conservation is an effort. It is an endeavor that seeks to preserve, conserve, and protect not only buildings, objects, landscape, and other artifacts of cultural and historical significance. The Malaysian experience has subtle, distinct characteristics as expressed in the built forms and living flavors to create their own identities, albeit as influenced by the environment and customary practices based on common and inherited roots. Found within the evolutionary process of cultural heritage in a community and the extended areas of influence as practiced through the Asian regional intermigration, which was common then. Cultural values of a community developed by other influences are developed by other influences such as the natural environment, our tropical, equatorial climate and things like that. Climate, the people, the variety of races and people, cultural heritages, languages, lifestyles, religion, food, the economy, social conflicts, and achievements over the period. Every community has its own peculiar evolution of identity, character, and value, and Malaysia is no exception. Through the early kingdoms, Malay sultanates, regional trading among the Asians, especially colonial periods of the Portuguese, Dutch, and British, and finally the independence from the British in 1957 to our current modern state. Therefore, historically, Malaysia has inherited a variety of ethnic and cultural entities and identities, which has often been referred as the harmonious coexistence of Asian culture and experience, as echoed in the country's tourism tagline of Malaysia, Truly Asia. Malaysia's historic timeline can be classified in 5 periods, as I've indicated in this chart. The first one is prehistory. The second one is the early kingdoms. And the third one are the Malay sultanates, as well as the Chinese, Indian, Arab, and European traders venturing into the Far East. Then we have the fourth period of the British colonial and the World War II, and finally independence to the present. These 5 periods, if I may just briefly introduce, are the new skull that was found, dated through their carbon testing and all that, to about 40,000 years BC. And then quite apart from that, there is the Perak Man that was almost 14,000 years ago, that has been dated. Then the early kingdoms. During the early kingdom period, there are several kingdoms that you can discover if you want to, that lists from the 2nd century right up to the 13th and 15th, 16th century. From Ganga Negara, the Lankasuka, the Chitu civilization, the Pan, the Kedah Tua, Pahang Tua, and the Melayu, 6th century, and Srivijaya and Majapahit. These are all classical periods during which they not only existed, but they interacted with each other. because of the Sunda land that used to join the peninsular Malaysia to the Borneo states, as well as Sumatra and Java. That's the first and second period. So the third and fourth period are the Malay Sultanates. They have evolved their own administration as well as little Malay kingdoms. Of course, they are not only living in harmony, but they are also at war with each other from time to time. And I think that is common, and it is still happening right now around the world. So then you have, during the Malay Sultanates, the Chinese, Indian, Arab, and European traders were venturing into this area mainly for the spice, natural spices and things like that. So that was the third period. The fourth period is the British colonial period. And of course, before that, as I've listed on the upper section of the slide, the Portuguese Melaka, the Dutch-Portuguese War, Dutch Melekas, the Siamese invasion of Kedah, for example, Strait settlements, Kingdom of Sarawak, where quite apart from the sultans, the Malay sultans, there were English Rajas, English Sultan. Raja Brooke, for example, is a classic example of a foreigner declaring themselves to be the Sultan or the Raja. So North Borneo, the Federated Malay States, the unfederated Malay States were created by the British for various trade and administrative purposes. Then, of course, followed by the Japanese occupation during the war, and the various administrative bodies that were formed until the creation of the British resident system, where Malaya became British protectorates. So, okay. Then the historic timeline for the fifth period, which is independent to the present. So after the Second World War and the departure of the Japanese and the end of the Japanese occupation, of course Malaysia wanted to be independent, just as most British colonial states and countries were given independence by the British, were encouraged to be independent, and Malaysia was no exception. And of course, there were the initial concern about how the independence would be handed over and things like that. So there were a series of negotiations as well as meetings between the then rulers in Malaya with the British government, and then which ended with the Reed Commission, which was formed in 1956, comprising of Queen's Council from the various Commonwealth nations that helped to form the Malaysian Constitution. And of course, the Malaysian Constitution has to be has to accommodate the position of the Malay rulers that were then governing the various states in Malaya, and with the guidance of British residents and the administration through the Governor General from Singapore, based in Singapore, and things like that. So here I just included some of the historic moments. For example, in that photograph, Reed Commission, it was just fortunate, or by chance, my dad was the liaison officer for the Reid Commission. He was responsible for coordinating the presentation of memorandums by various stakeholders. I think there were about 138 memorandums presented to the Reid Commission from various stakeholders expressing their expectations that should be incorporated within the Commission, within the Constitution. So that photograph, by chance, through my research, I found this photograph, and on the extreme left of that photograph, this gentleman there, that's my dad. That was my dad. Anyway, so this is why the more I discover about how the country's birth or independence, then the more reason I felt that we should know this history. You see, this is quite a well-known fact in this country, and Professor Khoo Kay Kim, who has just recently passed away, used to say that the problem with us here is that we're not interested in our history. We do not do enough research in our history, and we are not keen to read, do research, and write. See, history has to be based on facts and evidence, and this is why we need to encourage, and in some instances, we may have to rewrite our history, because the history in the past, by tradition, has always been written by the victors or people in control, will write the history in the way that they like to see it. So anyway, now, since then, and having been back in this country for some time, this realization has caused me to take a greater interest in the history. I'm not a historian, but as a practicing architect, I find it very fulfilling as well as very knowledgeable to know about all this history. So anyway, coming back to the fifth period, so you have pictures of the Sultan, and then the historic photograph on the top here of the first young Dipertuan Agong from Negeri Sembilan, and Donald McGillivray, the last British Secretary General and Governor, Secretary General, and of course Tunku Abdul Rahman, the first Prime Minister of Malaysia, and of course our Parliament, the Malay rulers. And then again, we had a Cobalt Commission that looked into other aspects of our government. Then independence, of course, there's the series of prime ministers which we have, starting from Tunku Abdul Rahman and Tun Razak, Hussein On, Mahathir, Abdullah Badawi, Najib, Mahathir again, and Tan Sri Muhyiddin. And there's some development going on just this morning and last night. Don't know what the end result will be. And this is where we are at. So irrespective, we have to be aware of the current development within the context of the historical existence of this relatively new country called Malaysia. And the other reason I mentioned Tajuddin and Marianne the other day was that, here's an opportunity for me to speak to first-time visitors to Malaysia, to perhaps consider looking at the details of our historic existence, our heritage, and the need to conserve the tangible as well as the intangible heritage over the years for the future generation. Okay, heritage conservation of course, will be only viable and effective if there are acts and laws that can govern and protect it. Just as the Civic Amenities Act in the UK that I am familiar with, we must have this act. So historically, when there are now in this country 3 acts that protects our heritage and conservation. The first one, the Treasury Trove Act of 1957, was passed through Parliament, and then there is the Antiquity Act of 74. But the first 2 acts cover protection of historical and archaeological artifacts, but it had no protection and allowed for the demolition of privately owned and historically significant buildings, making way for redevelopment by the subsequent generations and descendants. So this is where the rapid destruction of very elegant colonial buildings, pre-independent buildings in KL were demolished willy-nilly, because they say, look, it's privately owned. There's no law that says that we need to preserve nor retain those buildings. So among them, there was this Chan Mansion, which was replaced by the Maya Hotel in Jalan Ampang. And then there was the Chua Cheng Bok House or Bok House that was replaced now by a hotel. And that particular hotel is suffering a lot because of this pandemic. So we've lost quite a lot of our heritage until we got the National Heritage Act of 2005, which includes buildings. And because of that, we were able to now gazette, identify, do research, document, and then gazette these buildings as our national heritage. And there is a list of almost 100 buildings that has been listed as part of our national heritage or architectural heritage. So, as I think, as mentioned, fortunately, most of the government-owned buildings were spared. And then we had, or I had the opportunity to subsequently turn them for adaptive reuse. But sadly, if you go around the city today, some of those buildings that have been renovated and refurbished for adaptive reuse have been neglected and are going towards ruins in spite of its status as our national heritage. Okay, that is an issue that is perennial for me. You know, I keep on suggesting, I keep on commenting, I keep on alerting, but there is no action. And especially today, with this pandemic, preserving and sustaining historic building is a lower priority. But whatever it is, we still feel that we should be caring for some of these buildings. Okay, so the provision in the National Heritage Act 2005 has expanded to embrace individual historic buildings of significance, groups of building, traditional communities, exceptional craftsmanship, natural and historic sites to be gazetted and classified as our national tangible heritage. Intangible heritage includes the diverse ethnic and cultural values such as religious practice, music, art, lifestyle, traditional food, literature, folklore, and a host of other unique Malaysian attributes. Today, Malaysia is privileged to have 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites within it. So the first one that was declared in the beginning of the century year 2000, is the Kinabalu Park in Sabah. The Kinabalu Park represents the fourth highest peak in the world. And quite apart from that, it houses it locates the biggest land mass or granite in the world. So that's one. Next. The second one is the Mulu National Park, where you get this unique collection of rocks, very sharp pointed rocks within that area, and large caves. In fact, the cave here in this lower right-hand corner, it's so large that you can fit 2 jumbo jets into it. That's how large that cave is. And personally, I've not been there, but for those who have been there, they find that it is a fantastic experience, especially to our participants who are in Malaysia for the first time, beyond the COVID-19 lockdown. If you get a chance, you should try and go to Sabah and Sarawak to see and experience this natural heritage, which is a World Heritage Site. And I am told also that the proportion of foreign tourists visiting these 2 parks are always higher than the locals. Okay, the third site, or third World Heritage Site declared in 2005, is a very unique declaration by UNESCO because of its twin nature. It has to coexist. In other words, it cannot be a separate entity. It has to be, you have to look after Melaka as much as you have to look after Georgetown, which is Penang. The Georgetown and Melaka site are the twin heritage site as cultural landmarks, because historically you will find in Melaka, for example, the evidence of the series of civilization and buildings that were built there, and the cultural practices. Say, for example, the Islamic evidence of the mosque are there, and the multi-religious existence of the people in Malaysia, the mosque sitting side by side with the Chinese temple and the Hindu temple and a church, and all that is all found in Melaka. And this is why Melaka becomes a major tourist attraction, because of the cultural and historic heritage status that it has. Now, because of that, there are very specific and strict conditions for it to remain as a cultural heritage. And every 5 to 10 years, there will be a review in order to sustain it. So if one fails, both cities or both towns will lose its World Heritage status. So these are just quick shots of images of Melaka. Okay, this is Georgetown. Again, historically, that's where it is. The existence of Islamic, Christian, Taoist, and Hindu culture is very well evident in Penang and in Georgetown. So the shop houses, the traditional shop houses, a lot of colonial buildings, a lot of trading offices, the original buildings are still there. So these 2 towns or cities, I call it, is unique in that sense, because it has not only physical evidence of the heritage and culture, but also the culture is still being practiced among the residents in Melaka and Georgetown. Okay, now let's go to the fourth one is the archaeological heritage of Lenggong Valley. And this is where, quite apart from the discovery of the skeletons, a few skeletons actually, of the Perak Man, is referred to the Perak Man, and this was scientifically established by carbon tests that it is about 11 early human settlements dated 11,000 years ago, using all this kind of tools, traditional tools, or very what you call primitive tools. What we call primitive tools are found there. Now, quite apart from that, they were able to establish the age of the skeleton when the person died, and it establishes one very strong fact that there was civilization. There was civilization in this part of the world, and that we, the people in this part of the world, we were not uncivilized. And you don't have to have foreigners or Europeans coming to introduce civilization to us. So this is why this narrative is now slowly being discussed and questioned, especially in Europe. I will tell you later that we had a very interesting seminar and discussion with regard to the Dutch East India Company and how they have today, from the humanistic point of view, how torturous they were with regards to the exploitation of local spices and products in the Far East. Okay, that's a bit of digression. So that's the fourth UNESCO, and there are some proposals that has gone into the early listing, but subject to further studies, that can be declared national heritage and world heritage site. Among them is our national forest in Bloom, the Bloom Forest Reserve. So, okay, so we move on. Okay, just some case studies. The advent of Western trading into the Far East started in Malaya, in Melaka, and this is the case of the Portuguese. And for 130 years, they were not only trading but established their control for trade in Melaka. And there were the likes of Alfonso de Albuquerque, Magellan. Now, these are some of the people that have visited Melaka, and some have settled and intermarried with locals, and the people are still there. Their descendants are still there in Melaka. In fact, there is a strong Portuguese community in Melaka. For those who are keen to experience it, by all means, go to Melaka and see all this and meet them. And then, of course, there were language was another thing. There was an exchange and the usage of the Malay language with the Portuguese language. So this is why I've put about 5 names there: Kereta, Cereta, Major, Mesa, Sekolah, Escola, Mentega, Mentiga, and Gereja, Igreja. So these are part of the cultural and the finer points of cultural heritage that I want to share and talk to you. And of course, they don't just come and trade, but they have to protect their business interests, hence the building of forts. And of course, there were others who are keen to take over, establish trading, trading ports. And Melaka became the magnet for the supply of other goods coming from not only the Nusantara area, but also from China and India and elsewhere, so that became a very active trading center. Melaka case study. Okay, then there is this historic thing which I had the privilege 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was in Lisbon, and I took the opportunity to talk to our honorary consul, who is a Portuguese lawyer in Lisbon, to find out more about the relationship between Portugal and Melaka, for example. You know, so I wanted to know, why was it that the 500th anniversary of the Portuguese in Melaka was not celebrated in a bigger way than it was, because this was in 2011, I think. 2011 is exactly 500 years since the Portuguese came. So the short answer, the simplified answer given to me was that the Portuguese traders lost in the war, and they were not proud of Melaka in that sense, because unlike Macau, they remain and they still are there, and they're still proud of Macau and Goa and other places, but not so much Melaka, because they were defeated in a war just outside in the sea, outside Melaka, by the Dutch, and because of various circumstances, so they claim, betrayal and things like that. So anyway, that's why. Then in the case of Melaka, we see, I've always been told since my school days that the person who circumvented the world, first person circumvented the world, was Magellan, Ferdinand Magellan. And I've understood it until at a later age, as I grew up, I found out that there was a story about Panglima Awang, Elias Henrik the Black, Elias Henrik of Melaka, and being the first person to navigate the world as part of Ferdinand Magellan's voyages. So in 1505, Magellan traveled to the east, and in 1511, Magellan acquired Awang in Melaka. He was then only 14 years old, I suppose, as his page or his assistant, as part of the spoils of war, you know, during that period. Then they were back in Portugal, 1512. And in my inquiry in Lisbon, we discovered that Panglima Awang, or Henrik, was well respected by the locals because they found him to be very knowledgeable about the Far East. Magellan had to move together with Panglima Awang to Spain. And it was the Spanish government, or the Spanish king, that suggested to Magellan to look for the western route. Instead of the eastern route to the Far East, it's a western route. So I think with 5 galleons, they left Portugal and went across the Atlantic Ocean, past the Argentina, and right across to the Pacific Ocean, and went across to the Philippines. What is the Philippines today? So, but on their first encounter in the Philippine island of Mactan, Magellan was killed. They were trading, and I think some of the local chiefs were not too happy about the deals because they were getting more than what in return and things like that. So because of the trading dispute, they fought with each other, and Magellan was hurt and killed, died in his ship in Mactan. And so that was the end of Magellan's journey, 2,500 kilometers away from Melaka. And Panglima Awang was freed, as stated in Magellan's will, that he shall be free when Magellan dies. And then he decided to go back home to Melaka. So that story has been recorded in the diaries of the people, an Italian seafarer with Magellan, to confirm that he did leave Mactan to go back home to Melaka. But up to today, there is no firm and indisputable proof that Panglima Awang got back to Melaka and then went back to Sumatra, where apparently he was from originally. Okay, these are some evidence. There is a book called Enric Melaka, image of Panglima, just a visual image, Panglima Awang, in Zulfika Rosi's book. And this Antonio Lombardo's diary, he did document that story about the war, which is shown here in the bottom here, just an image of the war, and then the battle at Mactan between the Philippines, and the statue of Dato Lapu-Lapu. He is the warrior, the local warrior that fought against the traders. And then there is in Lisbon a monument of discoveries. It is a general monument, but it describes all the ventures and historic events of the Portuguese seafarers. Okay, then the second case study is about the Dutch trading, because immediately after the Portuguese, it was the VOC. That is the Dutch trading company that took over the Far East and Melaka. And of course, again, they reinforced the fort and brought. So this is the only occasion where the Dutch and the Portuguese shot at each other from their ships outside Melaka. So hence, Portugal felt that they were defeated. So not worthy of remembering such a bad thing. But they are very, very successful elsewhere. So in that seminar, that a 3-day seminar we had in Melaka about 2 years ago, we had speakers from Holland, China, Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, Indonesia, to tell us and share some of the atrocities that some of these traders did. One particular one that really stayed in my mind is the execution of 30,000 people on a small island called Banda in the Sulawesi area, just because the Dutch wanted to control the discovery of nutmeg and the supply of nutmeg. And nutmeg was the principal extract and export from the Far East to Europe. So, and all this is spoken with a lot of regret and things like that. So anyway, that's another story. And these are some of the the circumstances that move the history of Malaysia and in Malaysia. Okay, go on. Okay, then the British trading. The third traders were the British. trading and occupation. So sometimes excuses such as, there were pirates who attacked our ship off your coast, therefore give us the culprits or we will invade you. So, and that's where people like Frank Swetnam came. Davidson and Davis were the first three British officers who came and dealt with the local rulers and things like that. So hence this some eminent British were identified, such as Sir Stamford Raffles, who was known to be the founder of Singapore, as if it wasn't there. He founded Singapore, kind of thing. And the same thing that with Sir Francis Light, declared as the founder of Penang. But long before that, there were people there. And so this unfortunate word, founder, seems to echo all over the world. The discovery of America, for example, the discovery of Australia is. So there are, I believe, academics and historians studying and trying to make good the truth of all these claims. So, in fact, one disturbing thing about the French extraction of payments from Haiti, and this was revealed a few weeks ago about why Haiti is such a poor country, and yet it provided a lot of wealth for the Europeans, the French in particular. So there are a lot of this narrations coming out, and we just have to openly receive them and evaluate whether they are of any significance and whether there is a need to rewrite. The word inverted is rewrite history. So it's just a thought. But otherwise, the British introduced the British law and established schools. In fact, Penang Free School was one of the earliest schools in Malaysia. Then you have Melaka High School. Then you have the Victoria Institution. That's where I went to school. The Malay College in Kuala Kangsar and all that. Okay. Then let's look at Kuala Lumpur in particular, because I was born here and I live here. I grew up here, and I was familiar with all these buildings because they were part of my growing up, and is my reference in life. So and these are the ones that I found neglected, and I felt that something must be done about it. So most of these buildings that is listed in the Kuala Lumpur and the Selangor area have been declared heritage in this country. So we start off with the top. Sultan Abu Samad was the Selangor State Administration building. Then the Masjid Jami, which is at the confluence of two rivers, where KL was founded in that sense, where early human settlements happened. And then, of course, this is another mosque in Klang, and the interior, the old mosque in Jugra, and then the Infocraft, which was the railway administration building, turned to the craft center, and of course Kakosa, the residence of the British Secretary General, and the first occupants were Sir Frank Swetnam and Lady Sydney. And this is why the lake across the park from Kakosa, the Tasik Perdana today, was called the Sydney Lake, and was named after her. And of course, you may have heard about the story about the lady in white that occasionally appears in that building. And while we were restoring that building to a guest hotel, there were talks about it. And personally, I've not seen the lady, but I can feel the presence of supernatural powers, or whatever they call it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then, just for an introduction, what I would like to show by way of photographs, you see, we mentioned caves and things like that. There are other caves in and around the country that has not been identified or popularized, or things like that. But otherwise, in the north of Peninsular Malaysia, in Kedah and Perlis, you will have some of this heritage, both tangible and intangible, especially tangible heritage, that is historic and significant to the cultural evolution of Malaysia and Malaysians. So there is a mosque up on the top right hand, top left hand. Then the Balai Besar, which is part of the Royal Audience Hall, and then a Balai Nobat, a specific building to house all ceremonial instruments. Then there's Kota Kuala Kedah and Lembah Bujang. Lembah Bujang is known to be the oldest Hindu settlement and trading post, and it is still subject to various archaeological studies and establishment. Although there are conflicts of interest and opinions by various communities that it is a Hindu sacred place as opposed to what is believed to be not true. But don't forget, long before Islam and Christianity came to Malaya, Hinduism was quite common in Lembah Bujang, what's it called, Angkor Wat, Borobudur. So those are the axis of Hindu civilization that we know if you put everything in the true context of history. And then you go Perak down south. That's where the Perak Man in Lenggong World Heritage Site. That's the actual photograph of the actual skeleton, you know, as well as a very classic Masjid Ubudiyah Kuala Kangsar, voted as the 5th most beautiful mosque in the world, and designed by A.B. Habak, who was a resident architect in Malaya then, working for the government, and was responsible for several of the historic buildings in KL, including the Sultan Abu Samad building, the railway station in KL, the administrative buildings, and so on and so forth. And then you have the clock tower, the Leaning Clock Tower. Just like Pisa, we have our own Leaning Clock Tower, and it's all because of settlement, ground settlement in Teluk Intan, because Teluk Intan is at river mouth, and it was built on the new river estuary, so it was not as stable as it should be, and hence the leaning. Then you have Kampung Masjid Dal in Padang Rengas, also a listed mosque, early mosque, and the architectural treatment is similar to the one that was used for the construction of the Istana Kenangan in Kuala Kangsar. Okay, then the Negeri Sembilan. Negeri Sembilan is another old thing. The Sultan or the Yang Ketuan Besar, or the Sultan of Negeri Sembilan, origins from Sumatra, from Pagar Ruyung, and they've been here for many generations. And you see the architecture, the traditional house, and the translation from a traditional house, town of Negeri Sembilan in Sri Menanti, royal town of Pahang in Pekan. So these are 4 royal towns, and I have been promoting and suggesting that we declare them as royal towns so that you can control the kind of architecture and the buildings that needs to be preserved within it, so that there is some semblance of the historic, status of such royal town. And then the Istana Hindap on the top right-hand corner was also designed by Habak, the same architect. Then at the bottom right-hand is a 250-year-old mosque, the oldest mosque in Greece, Milan, which has just got the status to be preserved and restored. And then hopefully we will do it after this lockdown. It's 200 years, nice history to it. Johor. Johor is another. Johor, by virtue of the Sultan of Johor, the earlier Sultan of Johor, who was very exposed to Western culture and civilization, saw that it is only fitting that the buildings that they build, their palaces, will reflect the Turkish influence in them, as opposed to the traditional rumah limas, traditional Johor Malay houses. And of course, the culture, Kuda Kepang. Kuda Kepang, as you can see, is that horse. They use that as a prop for the Kuda Kepang dance. In fact, that's part of our unintangible cultural heritage. Yeah, Kelantan in the East Coast. Kelantan also has its own unique architectural expressions and features and form, as well as influences. They are influenced from the Thai, the northern region, as well as from Java, because a lot of trading goes on the East Coast from Java, from Jakarta, Banten in Jakarta, through Singapore and East Coast to Thailand and to Cambodia. So that's another trade route, plus cultural route and cultural influence. And say, for example, that right in the center we have the Pasar Besar. That's an old tradition of marketing. You won't find a male trader. They are all females selling goods in the market. And then Masjid Kampung Laut on the top right hand is the oldest mosque, timber mosque in Malaysia, and it is just undergone relocation back nearer its original site, which is in progress right now. They are hoping to nominate it as a UNESCO heritage site, but I think they're going to have quite a tough time trying to comply with the requirements of authenticity as well as locality of the historic buildings in order to get that status. Then Terengganu, south of Kelantan is Terengganu. Again, the traditional rumah tradisi on the bottom right hand, and boats. There is a lot of fine art in not only boat building but boat decoration, and it's incredible. And you see weaving of songket, Kelantan and Terengganu, as well as even Pahang, are very famous for their songkets. And then the present palace and the original palaces. Then we go across to Sabah and Sarawak. Again, totally different cultural background, ethnicity, multiple of ethnics forming the population of Sarawak in the context. And here is the Astana, the equivalent of an istana or palace, which was the residence of Raja Brooke. Raja Brooke a Caucasian who became a Malay Raja. So, and you see that the architectural form is reflecting of the taste and preference of the patron and the ruler. So, okay, then you have the WHS Mulu Caves. Sabah has a lot of intermarriage, not only among the ethnic group, but with foreigners from China, European foreigners, and I think if you look around, there are a lot of beautiful ladies from Sabah who are of mixed parentage. My concluding remarks. Okay, Malaysia is a unique and young political entity of only 64 years. Our urban and rural landscape has changed and transformed, like it or not, so rapidly, arising from the various dynamic socio-economic and global pressures. Global pressures means, like, you want accolades, like the tallest twin towers in the world are in KL. And the second tallest building in the world will be in KL, which is under construction, should be completed next year, I believe, and things like that. And then large numbers of our significant older buildings and artifacts of nostalgia, historic sentiments with recognized listing values have been demolished and replaced by new modern buildings in keeping with the global image, architectural imagery, and monetary benefits. Change, for whatever motive and reasons, is inevitable and shall alter the physical and spiritual state of society if we are not careful. When necessary, it should not be done at the expense of sacrificing our multicultural records and identities. And with greater depth of understanding and open mind, we should share and sustain the quality of our unity, tolerance, acceptance, and the celebration of our diverse living cultural heritage. Our tangible and intangible heritage assets are products by various sectors and several generations of Malaysian civil society, and therefore a very priceless commodity. Perhaps I will conclude with these Malay proverbs that will help us towards creating the significance and awareness of our heritage. The Malay expression is jika tak kenal, maka tidak cinta. Literally translated, you cannot love what you do not know. And the second one is patah tumbuh, hilang tidak berganti. Once you've lost your heritage, you will forever, it is lost.